Is he a monster, a zombie, or a creature of science fiction? The character I'm talking about is none other than Frankenstein. Quarter Artistic Productions and Cortisone Theater on Seminole Street are presenting Frankenstein during this spooky season. The show opens this Friday, and for more, we're joined by cast member Abby Lee Hallett. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being here. Who is Frankenstein? Is it a monster?
Okay, so this is something that it's a very talked about sort of question. So traditionally, Frankenstein is Victor Frankenstein, who is kind of the protagonist of this particular play. He experiences an extremely horrific tragedy at the beginning of the play, and from this kind of sets his sights on trying to outwit death instead of kind of experiencing the feelings that accompany such a tragedy. So that is Frankenstein. A lot of the time when people hear Frankenstein, they think of like the big scary green guy. So that is in our show is going to be called the creature, but there is kind of some connection there. So I guess he's still kind of connected to the Frankensteins. People can kind of decide what they maybe want to call him once they see the show. I don't want to give too much away, but there's definitely that kind of familial relationship, the creation story. So he is technically Frankenstein if you refer to the creature, but in our show, if you hear Frankenstein, you're probably going to be seeing Victor running out.
What do you think it is about this story? Because, I mean, the novel was published in 1818.
Yeah.
We're still talking about it. We can still have fun conversations about what exactly is Frankenstein. Why do you think it's had such a shelf life?
Oh, well, okay. I'm a little biased because I'm in the show and getting to see how amazing and extraordinary the actors are and their performances are. But in terms of the story itself, it really, I think, stays with people because of, I think we've all kind of been in that situation where we've been so focused on something and we think that, oh, if I focus on this thing and I really go for it, that is going to solve all my problems. And as you keep going towards this thing, it starts to take over you a little bit. And suddenly you realize this thing that you've created is kind of out of your control. I think there's a kind of connection and a fascination to that because I think we have all been there in some respect. And also it's a very interesting kind of interplay, I think. And in our show, you definitely see you never kind of know where the power lies between Victor Frankenstein and the creature. It's a constant tennis match of who has the upper hand. And that as an audience member is very exciting to see when you don't fully know. So I think that really is engaging to people. And of course, like seeing the incredible performances in our show, we have Dalton as Victor, we have David playing the creature.
And what's your character?
I'm playing Elizabeth, who's the fiance of Victor. Elizabeth starts out with kind of huge vitality for life. She's someone who really wants to experience life and experience all that her life has to offer with Victor because they've just kind of become engaged. Unfortunately, that lasts for a very short period of time. But I've definitely fallen in love with the character, and I hope that folks who see it do as well.
Is there a version you're pulling your inspiration from? Because there's so many ways to absorb the story of Frankenstein.
Definitely. So that is perhaps more of a question for our director. But in terms of how I'm viewing it anyway, the framing of it is really interesting because I myself went down a very big rabbit hole. I've watched so many different adaptations of this. And with ours, it's sort of framed with this tragedy happens to Victor right at the beginning of the show. And that kind of frames his path. Like he's always very interested in finding out like this spark of life and how to outwit death. But when this tragedy occurs, it just pushes him all the further. So I'm maybe a little bit biased. I come from a mental health background myself. So in seeing kind of how Victor goes down this path, instead of kind of feeling the grief and feeling his way through the tragedy, he's trying to just outwit it so it doesn't happen again. Whereas other adaptations, it kind of just starts with maybe in some respects, not all of them, Victor just like kind of has this innate drive to find these unanswerable questions, whereas in ours, there is that sort of grief framing of it where I think that's something that can connect to a lot of people if they've been feeling grief. Feeling through it is the hardest thing to do, and sometimes it feels more not easy. It's never easy, of course, but the sort of first instinct is, okay, well, maybe I can just get around it in some way. And that's really what happens to Victor. We always are like, if he only just felt his feelings, this would not have been as sad of an ending of this particular show.
Abby Lee, thank you so much for coming in this morning. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Abby Lee Hallett is one of the people in the cast of Frankenstein. The show opens this Friday at the theater on Seminole Street. There are 9 performances ending November 9th, including Halloween night.